I want to show media hoax, another reason not to believe anything that Hamas says in its war against Israel, and not to trust anything that journalists in Gaza say, either being in territory run by this terrorist group. Last week there was another shocking claim. Israel had killed another 9 Palestinians when it bombed an aid vehicle, bringing food to the starving. It's a story that went around the world, with even our news.com.au running an Al Jazeera report on this atrocity.
This is the second time in a week Israeli forces have targeted a crowd waiting for food.
But a warning, Al Jazeera is actually owned by Qatar, which funds Hamas, and it shows. Here's what actually happened. Here's how we got shown those photos, this footage of this blown up aid truck, somehow with unmarked protective vests draped over the wreckage, and posters and apparent aid at the back, also untouched by any blast. It was funny, that. Because let me show you, Israel filmed itself bombing this truck by the beach near those telegraph poles, and it said it had killed a Hamas operative, and initial footage filmed by Al Jazeera showed the initial reaction. People rushing to see, and look, you can't see any posters, you can't see any safety jackets, you can't see aid food parcels at the back, and nothing to indicate this was bringing food to anyone. No posters up front either. Yet soon, miraculously, there were posters all over the wreck to suggest it belonged to an aid group and was carrying food, which the Al Jazeera reporter then faithfully parroted in a report that went around the world. Those evil Israelis.
It's obvious from what's on the truck that this is one of the NGOs who are working on the ground in helping Palestinian displaced families, because all of these banners are for projects implemented on the ground. The people who were targeted are part of this initiative. Israel is not only blockading aid into the Gaza Strip, but it's also killing Palestinians who are working in helping people from starvation.
Believe nothing from Al Jazeera or Hamas, and ask why our SBS, taxpayer-funded, runs an Al Jazeera bulletin every week. But to Australia's top foreign affairs writer, Greg Sheridan of the Australian newspaper, look, our taxpayer-funded SBS runs Al Jazeera propaganda. As I said at the top of the show, it's also the government's given $800,000 to academic Randa Abdel Fattah as a post declaring her admiration for Palestinian terrorists, including one who killed 13 children. I don't think we actually, a lot of people here understand how serious all this really is.
Well, you're absolutely right, Andrew. So years ago, SBS used to run news produced by the Vietnamese Communist Party, and I was a small part of running a campaign to stop them from doing that. It was profoundly offensive to Australians of Vietnamese extraction. There is no reason why Australian taxpayers pay money to Qatar to give to Hamas for the privilege of putting Al Jazeera on our taxpayer-funded network. It's grotesque. The level of ignorance and misrepresentation about the whole Israel situation right throughout the ABC and SBS. I mean, would you have heard that Israel is offering a ceasefire right now, but Hamas won't accept it? It's put on absurd conditions, but if it would release the hostages, it could have a ceasefire tomorrow. Would you have heard how much aid Israel actually allows into Gaza every day? I'm not saying Israel is beyond criticism or that it's doing everything it should or anything like that. The absolute lack of context, the way they say Israeli occupation is illegal, that implies the Israelis should simply withdraw from the West Bank and Gaza tomorrow. What would happen then? Hamas would take over everywhere and would launch deadly war against Israel. Israel would have to respond with the kind of death and destruction we're seeing in Gaza right now. But
Hamas then would own territory in the West Bank that's about 8 kilometres from Ben Gurion Airport, Israel's main airport.
Yeah, and they would
what happen?
They would attack, and Israel would retaliate. But I've seen ABC report after ABC report which just says the presence of Israelis is illegal, as if, you know, you're trespassing and you should get out. There's a simple solution, whereas Israel has offered time after time after time generous deals for a Palestinian state, and they haven't been met by any credible interlocutor on the other side.
But I don't understand. But all these protests, peace, you know, ceasefire now. Do they realise there was a peace, there was a ceasefire in Gaza? And Hamas broke it by slaughtering 1,200 people.
Yeah, I'm astonished that in this highly moralistic tone that the ABC adopts about this conflict all the time, it never attributes any moral responsibility to Hamas for the suffering of the people in Gaza. The suffering of the people in Gaza is real. We all want it to stop. Every civilised human being wants that to stop. But the responsibility for it, both causing it and continuing it, rests with Hamas. So why isn't anybody putting on them under any pressure?
True. That is so true. And tell you what, for all the huffing and puffing of the West, America now, Biden, you've got to stop Israel. Being in Israel, talking to people on both sides of politics and top to bottom to the president down, they are not going to stop. They want Hamas beaten and they want to drive Hezbollah in the north back, and the West can huff and puff, but Israel must be safe. That's how they feel.